Hey guys, Pokémon here. In today's video, we're going over all of the top 25 Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Yes, these are the 25 strongest Pokemon in all of Pokemon Go, post, nerfs, and buffs. Yes, there are new nerfs and buffs that have made certain Pokemon better and certain Pokemon worse. There is a Pokemon here that should be here, but it's no longer here because of these nerfs. So let's go ahead and talk about everything and all the new Pokemon you need to be focusing on to power up, all that kind of stuff. So make sure you guys are ready for this, because number 25 on the list is Mega Charizard. Just an absolute classic Pokemon. I mean, just one of the most iconic Pokemon of all time, and its Mega form is really, really good. Specifically, Mega Charizard Y. Not Mega Charizard X, which is a Dragon Fire type. That one's still good, but it's definitely not as good as Mega Charizard Y, as this is the second best Fire type in the entire game. So it's definitely one you could power up. We'll talk about the first best Fire type later on in this video, but it's definitely one you gotta take a look at. But coming in just higher than it will be Terrakion. Yes, Terrakion is a fighting and rock type and is very good as a fighting type. Now, it's going to be the third best if you want to, exclude multiple variants of the same Pokemon, because Keldeo is actually 1 and 2. We'll talk about that later on. But we got ourselves Terrakion, who's very, very good as a fighting type and semi-decent as a rock type as well. So it's definitely a Pokemon you want to look into to power up, because again, dual usability, but mainly that fighting typing is a really, really good typing for this thing, because it can hit some of those ice types and all that kind of stuff. It's got super effective against a lot of different typings, so it's definitely one you want to look at. The steel legendary bosses and all that kind of stuff, definitely don't want to see Terrakion. But coming up next is a really good rock type attacker, and that is Shadow Rhyperior. Now this thing is going to make Charizard absolutely shake in its boots, as it is quad effective against it, and that's a good thing that rock has. It has a lot of quad effectiveness. Now, Shadow Rhyperior is one of the best, but not the best rock type in the game. We'll get to those later on in this video, but definitely a Pokemon you do not want to pass up on. It's also very, very strong in PvP, although its moveset is slightly different, as you want Breaking Swipe and a couple other things in PvP. But the only thing that decreases this thing is Smackdown did get a nerf. It was already very, very good, but it got slightly decreased. It's like a 99 to a 95. It's still really good, but definitely a Pokemon that's still worth powering up. But right after Shadow Rhyperior is another Mega Pokemon, and that's going to be Sceptile. And with the nerf to Kartana, Sceptile is back to being the number one grass type in all of Pokemon Go. So it's definitely one that you want to be going ahead and look at. And I just mentioned Kartana getting nerfed. It unfortunately did get nerfed, and it's down to the 9th best grass type, which is kind of tough to see, especially as I saw a lot of people powering up level 50 Kartanas, and now it's like not useless, but it's not the best grass type anymore. And Sceptile is just that, so you definitely want to do it, because honestly, we don't have that many good grass types in Pokemon Go. So this is a very good power-up, definitely one that you'd use a lot, especially in these water type raids. Kyogre's literally going on right now as we speak. Groudon is next, and this could be used for that as well. So two Pokemon, that are very, very good legendaries that Sceptile is pretty good against. So I'd definitely be considering powering up, and this is probably maybe a priority, almost number 1, because of the next 2 weeks that you need it. But in front of that is Shadow Excadrill, and honestly, this is kind of not a biased pick, but I may or may not have a Shadow Hundo Excadrill. But this thing is absolutely great. Now, it's a top 10 ground type, which is really, really cool. It's still a really good Pokemon there, but it's also now the second best steel type in all of Pokemon Go. Now, that number 1 steel type, we'll get to that, trust me, later in the video, because that is a very, very good Pokemon. But it's definitely one that you do want to power up. It's Shadow Excadrill. It's quite frail, but it's also useful in PvP, so you kind of get dual usability. But it is definitely a good array attacker in multiple typings, which is really cool, ground and steel. Again, number 2 steel jumps ahead of Shadow Metagross, who just got off this list because of all the nerfs, which is just a little bit unfortunate to it, but definitely second best steel and top 10 ground, definitely something you should look into. And now coming into the top 20 is Mega Garchomp. Now, there's one good thing about Mega Garchomp. It's an absolute beast. Now, the other thing is, the unfortunate part is its typings. It's Dragon Ground, which are some of the best typings in the game in terms of there's Pokemon that are some of the best of the game in these typings. So it does, unfortunately, go behind a little bit in terms of the power curve, as there's a couple Pokemon ahead of it in each typing, but it's still one of the best ground types and one of the best dragon types. And if you can't get yourself your hands on Primal Groudon or Mega Rayquaza, this is your next best option in both typings. So it's probably pretty smart to grab these. Mega Garchomp, still very, very good to power up, and it's very good typing ground and dragon because you can Mega Evolve it and get all of these extra typings for XL candies, which is really, really cool, but definitely worth a power up as well for rating. And number 19 is going to be Shadow Mamoswine. Now, this is a Pokemon that you should have been already powered up, so it's still really, really good, but it is no longer the number 1 ice type in the game. That title goes to something we'll see in a little bit, but definitely still a really good Pokemon to power up, as ice is still a really, really good typing, and in ground, it did, you know, get passed up by a couple things, but it's still decent in ground as well, but ice is really where you want to focus with this guy, as it's just barely number 2, and we'll talk about number 1 in a little bit. But following those guys is Mega Lucario, another Mega Evolution, but this one also got passed with the brand new update by a certain Pokemon that we'll talk about later, but Mega Lucario is one of those best Pokemon in the game. I mean, it's just so good in terms of being able to output damage into Team Rocket battles, so this is already one that you could do. This thing absolutely solos Giovanni, which is a very, very good thing as well, but Lucario by itself is also a really good Shiny, so I would power it up anyways if you have a Shundo, you know, of course, but if you have a Hundo, it's still a really, really good power up. Second best fighting type in the entire game, just barely too. It's very, very close to being number 1, but definitely deserves a spot on this list, and we'll talk about the other Pokemon a little bit later. But edging out Lucario just by a little bit is Origin Form Giratina, and this is a big one because Giratina is actually just a super cool Pokemon and very, very good in PvP, but it's also now going to be even better in raids with a huge buff to Shadow Claw. A move that was already really good just got even better, so in raids it's getting 40% better, and it was already a good raid attacker, so this is definitely one I would recommend powering up. It's a huge power up that, you know, a lot of people love Giratina. I hope it does come back this fall, at least in Halloween. That'll be really, really nice in raids Origin Form specifically, because this is one that I've already raided a ton, but I would love to raid even more because it's such a strong Pokemon. Sitting just in front of it is Palkia, and this is mainly Origin Form Palkia, but the other Palkia is still decent, but you definitely should power up the Origin one instead. But Palkia is really, really good in PvP. If you didn't know, it's a top 5 Pokemon in PvP. Like, it's just absolutely amazing there, but it's now also going to be useful as a raid attacker with its movesets of, I believe, Dragon Tail and Aqua Tail, and then you got Spatial Rend, of course, but really good as a water and dragon type. Definitely one you want to power up. I think it's top 7 in both, which is really, really strong. It honestly probably deserves a higher spot on this list, so, you know, that's probably on me, but, you know, we put it for 16 it now. It could probably be even up towards number 10 on power-up rankings, but you guys let me know if I got any of these wrong in the comments down below. Let's get on to number 15, though, because it's kind of funny. And it's kind of funny because the one right in front of it is Dialga, its counterpart. And the reason why I put it slightly in front is because of the buff of Metal Claw, which is going to make it even better as a steel type attacker. It's going to be number 4, and it's still really, really good as a dragon type attacker, which is top 10 as well. And it's really good in PvP and counters Palkia, so maybe I just put it there just for the memes. And because I prefer Dialga over Palkia, you guys let me know which one you guys like more. But both Origin and normal Dialga are really good, and that's why I put it slightly above, because Origin Dialga is number 5 and number 4 is normal Dialga, so you know, in steel type attackers, so that's kind of something that's just like neck and neck that I think is just fair to say Dialga is probably a little bit better because both of its forms are a little bit better than Palkia's forms in terms of them being together. Just in front of them is still Shadow Mewtwo. Now, this is honestly a shocking thing to not see in top 10 because Shadow Mewtwo is usually a Pokemon that is all the way in the top 5, but with recent nerfs, it's definitely gone down a little bit. Psystrike got a big nerf this season, which is kind of unfortunate in terms of, you say it, you know, King fall down a little bit, but it's still a really, really good Pokemon. Don't worry too much about it. It's still a Pokemon you want to power up, and when Mega Mewtwo comes to the game, I mean, that thing's going to be number 1, and it's not even close because, I mean, well, it is pretty close because Mega Rayquaza is a beach. We'll talk about that later, but I will say Shadow Mewtwo, definitely one you still want to power up. Definitely get your level 50 Mewtwo's because it's still going to be super, super useful and super type diversity, and it's good in PvP. Just so many things that are amazing with Mewtwo. But just ahead of it is going to be the number 1 ice type in the game for now, Shadow Weavile. And I had to put this up here because it's also top 5 in Dark, so it's a very, very good Pokemon there. But Shadow Weavile being the ice typing is a Pokemon that we're going to be using a lot as we have so many dragon type legendaries. Ice typing tends to be one of those better typings for raids as you can hit so many different legendary boss with one single Pokemon. And honestly, I think it's just a good power up. It's always good to have ice types powered all the way up, so it's definitely one I recommend level 50ing, especially now that it's number 1 Shadow, well, not number 1 Shadow, but it's number 1 ice type in the entire game. Definitely a good power up. But just in front of it is the number 1 fire type in the game, and that is Mega Blaziken, because overall, Mega Blaziken's a little bit better than Shadow Weavile, as it's a little bit more bulkier, and it's a Mega Evolution, but it's the number 1 fire type, and it does so much damage, which you love to see. Now, technically, if Groudon ever got a fire type move, that would be the best fire type in the game. I'm talking about fire type fast attack, because it does have fire punch, but if it somehow got a fire type fast attack, that thing is going to be number 1 fire in the game, because Primal Groudon's an absolute beast. We'll get on that later, but this just missed the top 10. Number 12, still a very, very good spot, but Mega Blaziken is definitely a Pokemon you do not want to ignore, as it's also a good fighting type. But just in front of it is a Pokemon that just misses out of the top 10, and that shows you how good the top 10 is, and it's Mega Tyranitar. It's such a good Pokemon, number 1 rock type in the game, well actually, number 2 rock type in the game, sorry, and one of the best dark types in the game, so it's definitely one you do not want to bat an eye at, but Shadow Tyranitar is also really, really good, so it's kind of just them together here at 11. It's Mega Tyranitar and Shadow Tyranitar. Just both of those, I would power up them. They are very, very good. Tyranitar base form is also very good in PvP, so not bad idea to go ahead and power that thing up. With Brutal Swing also getting buffed, it's even better as a dark type. I mean, it's just really, in PvP as well, it's going to be a menace, so it's definitely one you want to power up. Probably have it a little bit too low, but the top 10 is so stacked that it's hard to make an argument for it getting in there. And the first spot on this list in the top 10 is Xurkitree. And honestly, this is one that's tough to even put at number 10. It's just such a good Pokemon, but we have another electric type coming up in the next spot that we need to talk about, because it's absolutely making waves right now with how good it's going to be. But we also got ourselves Xurkitree here with so many moves. Power Up is even useful. If it ever gets a grass type fast attack, it actually becomes one of the best grass types in the game, which I find absolutely hilarious. But Xurkitree is very, very good when it comes to just overall usage as an electric type. Going to hit all of those water types, all those flying types, just really, really good for that. So definitely one you want to power up, especially with the current raid boss going on with Kyogre and the next 2 weeks of it. So definitely one you want to power up and one you want to make sure to stash, because I think whenever Shadow Xurkitree comes out, that thing's going to be nuts if that ever comes out. But just edging it out is the new best electric type in Pokemon Go, and you're going to be shocked when I say this. It's Shadow Magnezone. Yes, in the top 10. Yes, I mean, it's absolutely shocking to see Shadow Magnezone go from being good to just being one of the best Pokemon in the game out of absolutely nowhere. And what hurts me the most is I purified a shiny 98 Shadow Magnezone to a Shundo. Now, as a Shundo, it's still number 9 electric type in the game, but it's not quite that number 1 that it could have been. It would have been one IV point off being the number 1 like Hundo Shadow. Like, I don't know if I regret it at this point, but hey, it is what it is at the end of the day. Still a very, very good Pokemon, and Shadow Magnezone is an absolute beast and takes over in this new season, because it's also number 6 with the new Metal Sound buff as well. It's number 6 as a Steel type, so this thing is absolutely busted. Just going to be so, so good, so it's one you definitely want to power up. Number 1 Electric, number 6 Steel type. I mean, this thing is absolutely crazy. Definitely worth the power up. But just in front of it is a huge surprise with Keldeo. Climbing all the way up and getting above Mega Lucario in Pokemon Go is Keldeo. And this is a Pokemon that I think you're definitely going to want to power up, and just so much. It's just such a good Pokemon. Keldeo by itself has now gone like berserk. I mean, this thing literally overnight became a sensation, which you just love to hear, and it's now the 18th best Pokemon in the game, but that's with, 4 forms of Mega Rayquaza standing in front of it in terms of pure damage, which is absolutely crazy. And obviously, there's 4 forms of Rayquaza, 4 forms of Groudon, and multiple forms of a few other Pokemon. But I'll tell you right now, like Duskmane and Dawnwings, which you'll see very, very soon on this list, but I'm telling you right now, this thing is one of the best Pokemon in the game, which is just absolutely amazing. And it's going to be so good. It's number 1 fighting, and it will be super useful when it gets its other form as well, which isn't even in the game yet. And that thing's just as good, which is just absolutely amazing. So definitely power up your Keldeos if you have them. They finally have a lot of use in Pokemon Go, which is pretty exciting. But then we move up to number 7, and this is a classic Pokemon, and we have a plushie of it right there. We got ourselves a Mega Gengar, which is just a super, super good Pokemon, a really good Ghost type, and with the Shadow Claw buff, it's right back in being some of the best Pokemon in the game. And it's actually super useful in multiple facets now, but it's just all damage. I absolutely love it. It's kind of frail, but man, does it just deals so much damage. It just does so much damage, so it's definitely worth the power up and usability with it. It's one of the best ghost types. Actually, sorry, it is the best ghost type. And actually, funny enough, we'll have it in an honorable mention soon. The number 2 ghost type is actually really surprising. So stuff you absolutely love to see, but let's go on to the next one. And right before we get to the honorable mentions and the top 5, it is Shadow Rampardos. Yes, Shadow Rampardos is all the way at number 6 now, and it's again one of those Pokemon that's frail, but the damage is just too much to ignore. This is the number 1 rock type in the entire game, even over Mega Tyranitar, and it's just dealing insane amount of damage, so you definitely want to go ahead and just take advantage of this thing and use it. It is number 1 rock type. It is definitely going to be your best solution for anything flying, anything ice, anything that is super effective against is going to be super useful. Fire types even, like just all of these things are shaking seeing Shadow Rampardos. But before the top 5, we got ourselves 4 honorable mentions. Now, we got ourselves Shadow Chandelure, who is now a top 10 fire and ghost type. So I thought I'd mention it because it's just really strong in 2 different typings. I think it deserves to at least be an honorable mention. Now, we also got ourselves Mega Banette, which is surprisingly really good. It's the number 3 ghost type. I said Gengar was number 1. I'm now realizing it's actually number 2 because we talk about the number 1 ghost type later on in the game. But number 3 ghost type is Mega Banette, which I never thought I'd be saying it's that good, and it's right behind Gengar. That's pretty, exciting in terms of Mega Banette. I never thought would be up there in that conversation, but it's definitely a Pokemon you'd consider powering up if you don't have, tons of Mega Gengar energy and you have a little bit of Banette energy. But you move on to Landorus Therian, who is a great raid attacker for, the ground typing. I believe it's top 6. I think it is 6th, unfortunately, but just outside the top 5. But still very strong and definitely worth the power up. And it's just below, I think, normal Groudon or just around that. But it's also very good use in PvP. So you should probably just power it up anyways. And then you got yourself the last honorable mention, which is Shadow Metagross. It's still a very good Pokemon in the game, but it is unfortunately now down to number 3 in the Steel typing, but it's still very useful. So you can use the ones you already powered up. You can keep those, keep using those, and power up some new ones. It's still probably pretty worth it. But now it's time for the top 5, and number 5 is Primal Kyogre, and this is a Pokemon that honestly was probably top 3, and it was up there with the top 2 not too long ago, but these new Pokemon got super buffs, so they just jump it, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But number 5, Primal Kyogre, one of the best Pokemon in the game. The water typing is a typing that hits some break typings for super effective damage, so it's definitely one you want, and it's super resistant against a lot of stuff, so water is really good to use, especially in PvP. Kyogre's a beast, stuff you love to see. Surf did get a little bit of a nerf in PvP, but that's okay. At the end of the day, I still think Shadow Kyogre is also very good, but Primal Kyogre is definitely an option that you definitely have to power up. Even normal Kyogre is good. Shadow Kyogre is really good. I didn't want to duplicate any forms on this list, but if I could, Shadow Kyogre and, normal Kyogre probably both make the top 25, so that shows you how good Primal Kyogre truly is. But just in front of that is the brand new fusion Duskmane Necrozma. Now, I say brand new, it's been here for a couple months now, but they got even more buffed, which is absolutely insane, especially with Duskmane getting Metal Claw, making it even, it didn't have Metal Claw before, but getting Metal Claw buffed, which means it's even better than it already was as a Steel type. It was already number 1 Steel type. Now it's number 1 Steel type by a country mile, which is just absolutely amazing. This is one of the best Pokemon in the game. Definitely going to be super useful in PvP and in raids. Definitely worth the power up. I mean, this thing is absolutely insane, but it's number 4 because the 3 things in front of it are also absolutely insane, but definitely worth your power up with Duskmane Necrozma. But now we get into the top 3. Number 3 is the other Necrozma, Dawnwings, and this thing is slightly better as the ghost typing hits more Pokemon for super effective and is less resisted by other typings. So I think Dawnwings gets the slight edge while also being a bigger damage outputter, which is like just a little bit. It's not that much, but it still just outputs more damage than Duskmane does, just by a little bit, but still both amazing Pokemon, both worth their power-ups. They are both in the top 5 for a reason, and Dawnwings just sneaks into the top 3. But let's talk about the top 2. And coming at the number 2 spot is Primal Groudon. And yes, Groudon is just an absolute beast when it comes to Pokemon Go. It's so useful in its normal form and its shadow form. Actually, honestly, Shadow Groudon probably makes the top 5 even over Primal Kyogre, which is actually kind of crazy to say out loud. But yeah, you can have 2 Groudons in the top 5. So even your Shadow Groudons, I would power those things up to level 50 at this point. But Primal Groudon is definitely the second best Pokemon in the game. It's just short at number 1. We'll talk about that one a little bit, but let's talk about Groudon because it is the number 1 ground type in the game, and if it ever gets a fire type fast attack, it's the number 1 fire type in the game as well. So a Pokemon that is just number 1 in 2 different typings is absolutely insane. I actually think in terms of DPS, it's technically number 1 in fire right now, but that's with a ground type fast attack, so, you know, it's technically, you know, I don't know, it's kind of a weird situation there, but definitely a Pokemon you want to power up. It's going to be so good against your steel types. It's going to be so good against so many other types, like any rock type legendaries, stuff like that. It's going to be so good. It's so useful in everything, every facet. PvP, Groudon's a monster as well, so definitely one of those Pokemon that you just have to max out and get that primal energy for. But you probably saw this coming. The number 1 Pokemon in all of Pokemon Go is Mega Rayquaza. Now, Rayquaza by itself is an absolute monster, and this thing, even in its shadow form and everything, both of those will probably make the top 10 in the future as well if I, allowed one Pokemon to get multiple times. But Mega Rayquaza is by far and away the number 1 Pokemon in all of Pokemon Go. This thing is an absolute beast when it comes to damage. It's one of the best, well, not one of the best. It is the best dragon type and the best flying type in all of Pokemon Go, and it's not even close in flying, and it's still not even close in dragon, if I'm being completely honest, even though you still want Dragon Ascent as your number 1 move. But Dragon Ascent also makes Rayquaza normal form one of the best flying types in the game. I believe it's number 3 or 4, which is just absolutely insane. That's even against Shadow Pokemon, which is absolutely amazing. Now, I'm curious if we could get Dragon Ascent on Shadow Rayquaza, because that'll make a big difference in terms of if Shadow Rayquaza is the number 2 flying type in the game or not, which is pretty interesting, but we'll have to see on that one. But overall, again, Shadow Rayquaza is that number 1 Pokemon, Mega Rayquaza is that number 1 Pokemon in all of Pokemon Go. It's just so good. It's almost untouchable, right? You use this thing in raids, you'll probably see if you ever Mega Evolve your Rayquaza, it gets recommended in every single battle because its DPS is so high that it's, automatically recommended, which is just absolutely insane. I had it even against Xerneas. If I Mega Evolve my Rayquaza, Xerneas, it was getting recommended. And Xerneas is super effective against Rayquaza. Yes, that's how good Rayquaza is. It's still good in that situation. So definitely the Pokemon you want to power up the most. That's our best Pokemon in all of Pokemon Go. So let me know in the comments down below what you think. What is your favorite Pokemon, and what do you think of this list? Do you think some Pokemon need to go up? For example, like something like Shadow Magnezone even, or do you think Keldeo deserves to go down? I mean, I don't think it does, but do you think that? I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments down below. Any opinions? I think probably one that I should put up a little bit was Palkia. I think it probably deserves to go over Shadow Mewtwo, but I don't know. You guys let me know in that in the comments down below. That's up to you guys. Make sure to leave a like though, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of all the new changes, and I'll see you guys in the new season tomorrow for the first vlog, and today actually in a couple hours, and 5 hours. Come tune in. I don't know when you're watching this video, but we're going live at noon until 8 p.m. with the new season, so let's go ahead and do that. But make sure to leave a like, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Oh, peace.